Hello and welcome to Mental Health and UPSC. I'm Dr. Shivan Chaudhary, and as you know, I run another channel called Clarity for UPSC. This channel is all about mental health. Today, I have with me a man who needs no introduction, one of India's foremost educators on polity, governance, ethics, and international relations, and personally, one of the best people I've had the pleasure of knowing, Atish Mathur Sir. Welcome to Mental Health and UPSC, and thank you for being here.
Shivan, thank you. Honestly, it is more of an honor and a privilege for me to speak with you. I've been your fan. You've been doing incredibly honest work. It takes a lot of courage to speak truth to power, and whatever you do it from the heart, and it comes across as like that because you genuinely mean every word that you put out there. And on behalf of the UPSC community, I'm genuinely very thankful to you for doing everything that you do. Honestly, it's amazing to be with you. It's an honor. Honestly, it is.
Thank you, sir. I think you've also told me that even humility is something I can learn from you, and I'll try. Well, okay, so this conversation that we're going to have today is about mental health. This is going to be no holds barred. At any time, if you feel I've overstepped my bounds, you can stop me. But I think it's very important for us to have difficult conversations in this sector because nobody else will talk about it, and these issues are not easy. So let's start a little bit talking about the mindset that one needs to have for this exam and how one should approach, considering how uncertain, how difficult it is, with about 10 lakh people filling the form and merely 180 seats for the IAS. What do you think is the mindset one should have once you enter this examination?
So, a lot of people who decide to appear for this exam uh, think of how they are going to be changing lives once they clear this exam, and they also think of how their lives are going to be changed once they have cleared the exam. And this twin balance sheet problem, so to speak, is essentially the root cause of why there is a lot more stress. Because aspirants and students realize that they're going to be a part of something bigger than themselves. And also at the same time, they're at that junction in life where it's no longer about getting admission into another college. It's about taking an employment decision, which is going to be a life altering decision. So what ends up happening is, in my general course of interaction, is that all of this starts accumulating over a period of time. People have had a lot at stake. The exam in itself is a very uncertain process. There is no one way to clear this exam. There are several wrong ways to clear this exam, to prepare for this, but there's no one right way to clear it. Uh, so as a result of this, the mind becomes very cluttered, and we tend to take this exam more than what it is. I've often realized that this is a sarkari exam. It has to be prepared in a sarkari way. Those basic tenets of preparation can't go wrong. Something as simple as a syllabus, a PYQ, as much as do less things more number of times as opposed to more things less number of times. Planning the next 1.5 years, and then proceeding with it. Those are the basic things that we don't go often right with, and that sort of adds up to the larger problem. To your question as to what is the mindset, I genuinely believe people should fall in love with the process of this exam. This exam is a life-changing experience in terms of the information and the knowledge it exposes oneself to, from gender to caste to mental health, to geopolitics to inflation to poverty. Name one other exam in the world which gives you such a nuanced understanding of it while keeping the reins a little tightened. And as long as you are enjoying the process of it with a limited sort of a circumference, because a lot of times students get carried away with their affinity towards one subject, and they become extraordinarily attached to, for example, IR is fascinating to a lot of people. and or for example economics, and I see a lot of people get very fascinated with polity, and they kind of ask me questions to which even I don't have answers to, right? And I don't have answers to most questions that that what if this happened, what if that happened. So the idea is, this exam is like a buffet. Enjoy the dish a little bit, but enjoy going to a buffet. And that's the mindset. And it is, the process is a lonely process. But to start out by thinking it's a lonely process, nobody's going to save you, you are responsible for your own being, it's a cruel process, it adds up. It is not supposed to be a lonely process. It's not supposed to be a process where everything else has to be shut out, right? You can still, you can, I often believe that preparing for this exam is like having a job. You sit and study for those 9 hours a day, take the weekend off, take at least one day a week off, plan it over a year and a half, and I think it's still doable. uh, but we tend to give it more importance than we should.
Sir, I think two issues are emerging from what you're saying. Firstly, what you've said so far, and I 100% agree with you. I mean, I think this exam has been a life-changing experience for me as well. Um, I sort of thought becoming a doctor from Maulana Azad Medical College would be an intellectually enriching experience, but I think nothing comes close to what this exam has given me. But also, I would like to say here that don't you think this glorification of the exam is not happening? The glorification of the result is happening. And a lot of that has to come from how toppers are projected for, how they are, talked about. And it's more about the final destination. You here are, of course, speaking about the journey, but that's not what's happening. What is happening is that people are just looking at the final result, what they will get, maybe that car with the red beacon and the respect and whatnot. And I mean, I might be completely wrong here, but do you really think that there are 10 lakh people in this country who are coming to this exam purely with the intention of learning? Or do you think there is a sinister thing happening where it has been glorified so much that people tend to enter it with a different mindset? And then when they face it, they realize that it's completely something different. And maybe that is the source of their problems.
Right. uh, I think it's basic human nature to be transactional. uh, Quid pro quo is something that is that most people are not born with, they eventually imbibe. So you're absolutely right on that front, Shivin, that people are appearing for this exam for something else in return, which has nothing to do or has very little to do with the process of this exam. There is a glorification on multiple number of fronts. Of course, the foremost glorification is that people are often, unfortunately, and I hate saying this, we're in the business of selling this exam, right? I've been in this line for almost a decade now. And what we're essentially doing is selling a dream. But the question is, what dream are you selling? Are you selling a dream that you clear this exam, all your life's problems are going to be sorted? You are looking for validation, and you'll get the best form of validation from society, from your peers, your families, your friends, all the uncle and aunties who never looked at you with the kind of respect that you wanted. So for a lot of people, this exam is a redemption exercise, or it's like a revenge exercise, that I'm going to make it count and I'm going to prove to the world, which I can understand that people have their own reasons to, but they are not sustainable in the longer run. Uh, then of course there is a glorification of the kind of work that has to be done, and the problem is we're not glorifying the kind of work it is to that needs to be done. We're glorifying the infrastructure in which the work is being done. The kind of work and the infrastructure in which the work is being done are two very different things. The kind of work that probably people in the civil services do is one of the most diverse in the country, but nobody really talks about it. Nobody really tells people that, you know what, you're responsible for why people are going to have homeless people or people who can't afford a home are going to have a home because you're the one ensuring and identifying them to be the beneficiary of a housing scheme. That is the work of the universe that you're doing, but we don't talk about it. We also glorify the civil services in the first 10 years of the civil services, that district, and you're the king of the district or the queen of the district. But it's a very long career, and there's a lot more that can be done. There are so many different avenues. There are very few people like you who are genuinely interested in, say, diplomacy or geopolitics, because that's also a very that is one of the most promising careers of the times that we live in. Because why, there was a point of time till the 70s and 80s, people were crazy about the foreign services, but now the scales have tipped in the favor of the administrative services. I rarely see foreign services as a top preference in most of the DAPs that I see during interviews. That's largely because the reasons have changed. So there is a glorification on that front. Thirdly, I think there is a glorification on uh, how so how uh, that how important you're going to be for the country. You are, but I believe an artist is as important as somebody who owns a cafe, as somebody who's a painter, as somebody who's a teacher or a scientist or a doctor or lawyers. Okay, but you you know, but yeah, that is that. So I think there is a, and I think I have been silent about this, and that is also an act of omission. That's an act of commission by omission. We've never spoken about it. I have never said that the civil services is going to set you for life to anybody, but I've never said that this is not the right way to go about it. I would have spoken about, people should enjoy what they do. Your civil services syllabus is a brilliant trailer into what your work is going to be. If governance and social issues don't interest you as subjects, then you'll have a tough time, doing all of this in the field. But that's where, I mean, I'm guilty of it. I'm guilty of not speaking out enough and saying that, boss, if you're joining the civil services because you think your generations thereafter are going to be set, that's not the case. I mean, I mean, it may be the case for a few people. We see those things, but those aren't ever the right reasons. But you're right. There is a multi-layered glorification of some kind. It always will be, from topper videos to all of those things. It's a whole rut. Yeah.
So, firstly, I think you're speaking out today, and I think that's also a thing that most of your colleagues won't do. And unfortunately, I think, see, for example, I don't know that many aspirants. I'm sure you know many more than I do. But in my limited interaction, I've never seen someone start the preparation and quit it without giving an attempt. Now, if it was all about the exam and the subjects, that should have happened for at least some people. Some people should have come and said, okay, I tried studying it. Maybe this is not for me and I'll leave it. But they would continue to give the exam at least once or twice and then continue to give it further. And I think a huge problem herein is that the coaching institutes are, I mean, I don't want to label the industry with one brush, but this entire ecosystem only talks of success. They do not even speak of failure. And okay, there might be some things that, if you study for this exam, you'll do something well in life later and it does enrich you genuinely. But there's no mention of that enough. There's a lot of mention of royal entry, marriages of toppers and whatnot. And I think their personal lives and whatnot should never be a part of what is being told there. But unfortunately, that's what happened. That's what's happening. And you see the views that are there on these shorts on YouTube where people are exiting a cab or a vehicle and they're being saluted by the police. So this glorification that is happening, where do you see a possible solution? Do you think we need to talk more about failure and how that's also okay? And that do you think also that the number of attempts that the government has allowed is way too much? For 6 attempts to be like spent, for 6 years to be spent in this field. And then thirdly, I'm sorry for this slightly long question, but for example, I have the IFS as the first preference because I did MUNs and I have a diploma in IR. But why have I never seen someone with IRS as a first preference? Or let's say with the Indian Information Service or the Indian Audit and Account Service is the first preference. Are these services not being talked about enough? And what can we do to change that?
Right. So no doubt, in the sense that we have a common exam, and that common exam uh, is recruiting a diplomat, a general administrator, a police officer, is recruiting a finance person, is recruiting somebody used to at least in the railways, and then several other posts. So a foundational question is the aptitude and the skill set required for somebody to be a diplomat versus somebody to be in the administrative services versus somebody to be in the police services are completely different skill sets in terms of the job that they do. But the nature of the country is such, and because we are who we are because of our population, we've taken a consolidated and, to my opinion, easier way out. You are absolutely right that there might be somebody who's in love with numbers. There are people who are genuinely financial wizards or have an interest in financial intelligence or computation. But the Indian Revenue Service is never talked about enough. There could be somebody who would have an enormous interest in mass communication, but instead of going the private route, would want to get into the information service. Why not? But the system has been built in such a way that the top guys get those top services and the rest of them get those services. It could also partially be because that later on, after a few years, the top posts are with a few services, so those services automatically become the more preferred ones. And our understanding of public civil services is that a public service or a civil service is truly a service where you're interacting with people more, and you have a lot more decisions actively to take on a daily basis, which might not necessarily be the case. Like, for instance, after the faceless taxation regime has kicked in, you will see that the IRS preferences have flipped. Back in the day, income tax used to be, sometimes ranked higher than customs in terms of DAF preferences. But nowadays, these are the arguments that I get when I ask a child, why have you put income tax? Generally, when they're filling up the form, though you will never be asked this in the interview, they tell me that we've heard that because there is faceless taxation, so the application is in Bangalore, it is being analyzed in Delhi, then it might be computed in Bombay, and we're sitting in front of the computer, so we don't have that kind of a physical interaction. Now, the underlying reasons might be something different, which we should not really worry about. But a government policy changes your service preferences. At the end of the day, what you're doing is essentially the same thing. You're just not seeing the person in front of you. So you're right. We don't talk about services enough. For example, the Indian Defense Estate Service, for somebody who's seeking a good work-life balance, the Indian Defense Estate Service is the best of both worlds. You get to be in military cantonments, but without having the hardships of a military life, while handling real civil administrative powers in the cantonment boards that we study in local self-government. Again, not talked about enough. That is there. To your question of, are we giving too many attempts, uh, you would realize that there is a word that we often say. You'll see a lot of people say, well, I have given 3 attempts, but only one serious attempt. That quote unquote serious attempt is something which I have never really understood to the best of my understanding. Why would you give this exam without giving a serious attempt? And to a lot of times students do that they're like, we have 6 attempts, we're not going to be spending 6 years. There is a lot of pressure from the parents that, oh, you've been preparing for a year, just write the exam. What is going to happen? The worst thing is you're not going to clear it. By the time a child understands the process of this exam, that okay, like the prelims has a set process. You've got to do those 10 things before the pre, 2 months before, and you're through, right? To figure that part out, sometimes people take 2 3 years. And is it, and I honestly think we in the coaching industry are responsible for it. It's because our curriculums are structured in such a way. Our curriculums are structured in such a way that, for example, in most coachings, including the ones that you would have most popularly heard of, there are different subjects on a daily basis, or 3 subjects on a weekly basis. So by the time a child is done with their entire syllabus, it is April, and the exam is in May. So the child is effectively lost out on the first attempt just by writing the first attempt. At least some substantial portion should have been covered by Feb end. Feb end is the right time to finish your most parts of the syllabus. And then, March, April, you need to deep focus on the pre. But that never really happened. So I think you're right. The number of attempts is because we are giving too many attempts. I think we used to have lesser attempts back in the day. But it's also because of how the process has become, and the more layered the exam has become. Today we have 4 GS papers, we've got 2 papers in optional, we've got an essay paper. Children are taking a lot more to figure this out. So should we have lesser attempts? I think so, because you'll save up a lot of time for students. But at the end of the day, this is also a fundamental right issue. uh, so this could also be a problem, that if we have 6 attempts, why should we not be it's our life, we want to write 6, we want to write 6, which is also okay. The problem is writing 6 good attempts. Nobody writes good 6 attempts. People will write 3 great attempts. 3 attempts are going to be in and around the other 3. That's the problem, I think. It's never the attempt number of attempts, but the intensity with which you're writing the attempt.
So adding to that, I'm just adding my opinion here. I also think that we need to normalize working with the exam a little bit more. It's not done enough yet. I mean, people are, it's sort of seen as going for a backup too early, that why are you not it. I don't think this is a process that requires your absolute dedication. If you've prepared for 2 years, then by all means go for something else and work. It gives you a sense of self-worth. It lets you, interact with people outside of the ecosystem, and that helps a lot. And since that does not happen very regularly in this ecosystem, it's sort of glorified. I mean, if let's say someone clears after 5 attempts, I mean, kudos to them, they've done great. But I don't think that's something we need to glorify and tell them that, okay, you kept sitting in a room for 4 days. What if you didn't make it in that attempt? What would you do then? And we have seen suicides in ORN happening. I mean, it does happen. It's not something that's not happening. And again, failure is not, it's not even considered as an option. Right? So this is my segue into a next difficult question for you. But I'm sure as a lawyer, you're used to much more difficult things than these. So, okay, so let's talk about now that, let's say somebody failed, let's say there's the prelims coming up this year, right? And about 5 to 6 lakh people are going to write it, and maybe 12,000 people are going to clear it. But I'm sure of the 6 lakh that are going to write it, not even one has thought about what will I do if I fail. And the simple fact of the numbers is that most of them, 90% of them, are going to fail. So then what should be their way forward? What should they look at? And how do you balance? At what point is it right to say that, okay, I've given, let's say, quote unquote, serious attempts, and now I want to exit that ecosystem? And what can we, as people who are, sort of doing things on YouTube for this exam, and educators, for example, do to facilitate this process a little bit more?
Right. It's an incredibly important part, actually. Again, most of us have a tendency to be escapist. When things get tough, we tend to shut them in a corner, and we tend to lock them in a box, and we tend to not even pay enough attention to it, and it's only a matter of time where it blasts and it comes in your face. One of the most difficult things to do in this preparation is to be honest with yourself, that, okay, have I really studied this? Do I really know this? And that's where the highest amount of disconnect is. And that disconnect is for multiple reasons. One, of course, the child herself is not tabulating her performance enough, or is not tabulating her progress enough. Secondly, the way the children are testing themselves. in terms of the kind of tests that they're giving, subjective and objective both. They can sometimes also be very misleading. Third, in terms of the kind of education they're getting in a coaching class, it might seem that, oh, if this is it, I know this, and great, my teachers finished it up for me. But you reach the exam, it's completely different. I mean, you have no idea as to what was being taught and what was being asked. There's not just a slip between the cup and the lip. The cup and the lip are in two different dimensions. As a result of which, we have what is called an honesty sort of a deficit that needs to be cured. Because once you've given your prelims exam and you sat down with the paper, then also we have what is called a bias. You will see that after the prelims result is out, almost everybody has missed the cutoff by 2 marks. There is nobody who's missed the cutoff beyond 2 marks. So all of the 10 lakh people, just a 2 mark margin, which is statistically impossible. We are even then not being honest with ourselves. If we've gotten these questions wrong, have we gotten these questions wrong because was a conceptual error, was a factual error, was a recall error? How deep were those errors? Can those errors be rectified? And then you will know your actual state of preparation. So on the basis of that, will you be able to decide that, okay, I need to spend more time on this exam than anything else? Or, okay, I've gotten some basics of it right. I just need to keep doing it and rectify those cross the T's and the and dot the I's, and I'll be okay for the next attempt. That kind of a realization will only happen when you're incredibly honest with yourself. And failure is something that we must acknowledge and celebrate. I and it's also a all of us UPSC teachers are the very benchmarks of failure. Let's be very honest. We would have tried this exam and not cleared it, or not gotten a preferred service. It's okay. I often tell students in one of those inaugural or bidding away lectures that I didn't make it because I didn't study hard enough for one of my options. It's that simple. It's not the exam's fault. It's not the universe. It's not luck. I didn't study hard enough. It's that simple. And failure is something that makes you understand that you went wrong, but it's okay. Figure out what else could you do, right? Uh, your question was in the sense that when is the right time to start doing something else? I decided that very early for myself. After the first 2 years, I said, okay, I figured out. I've given my two quote unquote serious attempts. Hasn't worked out the way I wanted it to. It's okay. Let's get out of it. It's fine. Which gave me a natural advantage. So I started teaching at a very young age. So I was able to take those many risks. It may have turned out the other way around. And every day you still have that complex. You wake up every day knowing that, boss, you're teaching people how to clear an exam, the very exam that you didn't clear, right? And it is a very important realization. And what happens is a lot of my colleagues will mask it with aggression, will mask it with a fear psychosis, that if you don't do this, oh, there is this. It's okay. I know my subject. I know what the exam asks from my subject. Those are the only two things that I can deliver. Good or bad, this is my reality. And that's what failure teaches you. Failure teaches you that it's okay to not be the best. And it's also okay to mess up sometimes. It's fine. Life will go on. And it's very important. So students must be very honest with their failures. And I mean, think about it. Most of the lead TV news presenters that we see are all ex-UPSC aspirants. We're in the age of political consulting, whether it is a political consulting organization by the name of ABM, Association for Billion Minds, which primarily consults for the lead party in the country. Their entire research division is led by UPSC aspirants, nobody else. From getting into multiple disciplines or getting into, further studies, you will see people everywhere. This exam will give you that ground knowledge, and that's okay. So it's fine. A lot of people will go back to their parent disciplines. But you're right, one should be okay with failure. One should not look forward to it, but one should not be scared of it. It's fine. And that's, I think, probably a good way to look at it. We really, really should.
Right. I think so. One thing all of us can learn from you is how honest you are. I mean, I have rarely seen an educator talk this honestly, in this openly. This is recorded, this is going on YouTube, and this is great. I think this is what we need at the moment, because this exam and the issues that surround it are something that everybody knows them, right? And maybe everybody has experienced them at some time, but they're not discussed enough. And this is the lead to probably what is the last question, and which is mental health. And this is why I started this channel. So firstly, I'd like to ask you, is what could we do more? Me and you particularly, and then we as students could do more, rather than just reaching out. I mean, which of course is the most important thing. But what specifically we could do more in this regard? And if you're okay with talking about it, do you think the educators in this exam also face the stress and the issues that maybe an aspirant faces with regards to mental health? And what is the way forward?
Certainly. I'm very happy to talk about it. I think it's high time we do. Uh, I think one of the worst things that we as educators do is, or teachers do is, when somebody comes to us with a mental health problem, we try to solve it for them. That's the first no-no. Apart from the general checklist that you should, if somebody is facing anxiety or clinical depression, or maybe not clinical depression, whatever it could be, it could be, there are several forms of it. The one thing we as teachers should not do is tell them a solution to it. We should acknowledge, we should say this is a genuine problem, we understand this is a problem, we can help you get professional help, but we certainly recommend that you get professional help. I have seen you know a lot of colleagues say, oh, in staff rooms we've seen students come and say, I am not able to sleep. So they will say, uh, you know wake up early and then you'll be able to sleep early. But the child is not able to sleep is because of something at the back of the child's mind, right? And I think the first thing that I said is that we should not try to solve it for them. The second is, unfortunately, we as teachers, as a collective, come from a very conservative ecosystem. Teachers have been ex-UPSC aspirants. Most UPSC aspirants have a feudal bent of mind. So, so if you think about it, teachers are people who wanted to get all the power in the world, or wanted to get, into the bureaucracy, but did not get in. So, they're here. But one should not trivialize it. That's the second most important part. Don't trivialize it. We may not understand it, but let's not trivialize it. Third is, a mental health issue is a lot more than we understand it to be. Addiction is a mental health disorder, right? A lot of people get addicted to alcohol, get addicted to smoking, get addicted to pornography. There are a lot of aspirants who write to me that, we're addicted to pornography. What do we do? There are a lot of people who have anxiety. Academic anxiety and general anxiety are two very different forms of anxiety. From a mental health point of view, apparently, and I'm not sure of this because I'm not qualified enough to speak of it. Apparently, there is a certain amount of anxiety which is healthy, but if you breach that threshold, it becomes counterproductive. I don't know what the threshold is, but I've generally read about it. I don't know the details of it. Depression, different forms of it. A lot of students come from very systemic histories of abuse, family abuse, domestic abuse, abuse by relatives, all forms of abuse. Uh, a lot of people come from a lot of issues which might come from, a feeling a sense of inferiority and all of those. So these are very complicated issues and they get intertwined. And then you place them in Rajendra Nagar, which is this hyped up pin code, which is where everybody is a nation builder walking on the road. It can be very daunting for a lot of people. So the one thing that we should not do is not trivialize it, not try to give a solution for it, and acknowledge it. What we can do is normalize talking about it. And I think one of the best ways to understand that mental health issues exist is when you talk about the fact that you've gone through it. Like, for example, you've done so. You have been so brave enough. And I'll take inspiration from you. Is that yeah, we as teachers, of course, there are multiple layers of mental health issues. I think if we as UPSC teachers ever had to get an evaluation done, we it is not a very pleasant space to be in for multiple reasons. We are, of course, byproducts of failure. Two, the industry is a very cutthroat industry. You barely have you barely have well-meaning colleagues. I've been fortunate enough to have two or three, three, four very good friends in who do the same thing as I do, but most people don't. The industry is it's an unorganized industry, so it's very uncertain. At the end of the day, people might think there is a lot of fame, there's a lot of money, which is unfortunately not entirely true. And it creates a sense of bubble in the minds of people. We as UPSC teachers think of ourselves as gladiators, but it's a pin code, it's a bubble. You step out of Rajnagar, nobody really cares who you are. The the reality is that we are people who are coaching teachers. We are not even academicians. I mean, the reality of UPSC preparation is what? You take a standard textbook, you take two or three good articles on a topic, you paraphrase it, and you have a lecture ready. That is our reality. Let's not try to kid ourselves by saying that, oh, we are intellectuals in the making. We are not intellectuals in the making. People are intellectuals who write in the papers, who write the books that we study from, right? So we suffer from an identity crisis, and sooner or later it catches up. There's of course a morality conflict crisis. I've had issues in terms of, I don't believe in promoting something and I've been asked to promote it, so unless I'm very sure about it, I will not do it. And there's this conflict. Apart from that, of course, uh, at least the pandemic made teachers into education influencers, and that is something that maybe I was not very comfortable with. So to constantly put it out there, on YouTube and get around it took a hit. And for the last 6-8 months, I have also been figuring out a lot of stuff. I have been massively delayed in a lot of my lectures that had to be pushed on a portal, and now I'm manually pushing them. There was an issue with the tech provider and all of those things, and the students gave it to me left, right, and center. And I've had I've and it because it's online, so whatever students say will hit you right here. And you realize that it is, they are right in their own way, and you know that you're doing everything, but despite putting all the lectures out for free, all comprehensive courses, you delay, there's always a backlash, and they're right. We have gone wrong, so it all adds up. So yes, we as teachers are classic cases of mental health neglects. It's high time that we take care of ourselves before we start giving yarn to the world that, you're right and you're wrong and you can't make it or you can make it, which is also one of the reasons why I don't believe in the motivation line of work, because I can never inspire somebody or give you two lines of code. What I can tell you is that the greatest motivation comes from discipline and comes internally. So yeah, you're right. I mean, mental health is something we really have to focus on. And if the students are listening, they must understand that we as teachers are also equally, and imagine we do this for years in our life. Students come in, put in their 4 or 5 years, they're out of it. We are in this bubble called UPSC prep for the rest of our natural lives. So of course there is a lot that happens. It's a very uncertain career. It is a very, at the end of the day, when you go to a social gathering, a friend of yours would be a corporate lawyer, the other would be an investment banker, the other would be a, something, and they're like, "Arey, aap to coaching mein padhate hain." So, initially, these are things that after a point of time will start bothering you, or if not, you'll hide them, and then they'll start subconsciously, and that's when you realize that what matters in life is I enjoy myself in a classroom. There's nothing more thrilling and there's nothing more I'm passionate about than teaching a UPSC crowd, because it's the most diverse. It's one of the toughest things to do, is to teach an engineer, a doctor, a lawyer, a historian, and a political scientist fundamental rights in a way that everybody goes home with something that they've learned. That in itself is a challenge. And that's something that drives me on a daily basis. And I'm very happy doing it for the rest of my life. But it took me many years and many months to come to this, especially when you come from, a certain background. So yeah, you're right. This is what we should do. Um, and once you have the means, take it as an individual CSR responsibility, uh, uh, not mandated. That I've ran mental health programs for a lot of students. I've referred them to therapists. I have taken care of the a little bit of what I could, but every time, we hear of a suicide, we hear of something, it really takes you back. But you're right, we should really talk about mental health. It's very, very important, the only thing that matters.
So I'm going to start now maybe in this educator journey. I don't know if I'll need to continue, but I mean, this is just my perspective. I see ourselves, like I see a teacher, especially in the competitive exam space, as merely a simplifier,
Yeah.
not an intellectual, not something who is just doing the easy things right and saving time for somebody else. That is it. That is the job description. It's my opinion. And again, like you said, it's much more important to do something that you like than something that you think people will like you for. For instance, and this applies just as much to the civil service. If you're entering the civil service and you've placed the IAS as your first preference, I have at least four friends who are just as interested in diplomacy, doing MUNs, giving the interview this year, but almost all of them, bar one, has IAS as the first preference just
Mm,
because they couldn't muster the courage to say that, okay, even with the top rank, I will not enter the best service in the country,
mm,
because it is still the best service in the country, right?
mm,
It should not be. It should be what interests you.
mm,
And since I also think that, you know, simplifying a competitive exam is something I'd like to do, especially the MCQ based thing, because I enjoy that. I'm willing to do this before my result comes. And this, I think, is something that we need to. I'm not blowing my own trumpet here. I'm just saying that this is something that needs to be normalized more. I've gotten a lot of hate for saying that, you are not even selected, you're teaching, you're launching courses, and this and that, and left, right, and center. But this is, I mean, only it can only be sustainable if we do it, if we like it. And it's the same principle has to also apply to the civil service. At the end, sir, I'd just like to say that Jordan Peterson, one of my favorite psychologists, writes in his book 12 Rules of Life that for conversations to be productive, they don't have to be easy. For all the negativity that we have discussed today, and that you have brought to light, that you've been honest about, I think I'm very, very grateful for the honesty that you've brought here. I think it's a rarity. I think that's something that a lot of people can learn from you, including me. And I think if the maybe we have not done enough yet, But if we keep having these conversations, maybe this is a start to normalizing this process, not making it a glorified thing where people are just doing it to enter something that maybe it's not as rewarding even after they enter it.
Mm.
So, with that, I'd just like to thank you for your time. Thank you for joining me. And thank you for being so incredibly honest. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Shivan. It's been an honor, as I said at the beginning. And what a lot, just to give you that last 30 seconds, just this is just for you and not for anything else. Uh, you're right, we're in the efficiency business, that we have to make sure that we're able to deliver the most efficient form of information to our students. And nobody knows efficiency better than people who are most recently associated with the exam. That is something that people don't understand, which is, I always say that non-lawyers teach polity the best because they're not romantically associated with the subject. In the same way, uh, you've not been corrupted with teaching so far. So therefore, you will be able to do a very good job of delivering only what is relevant. Because at the end of the day, this is an exam. So I wish you the very best. Keep up the good work, and honestly, you're doing God's work by talking about things that matter. And Godspeed to you. And thank you genuinely for having me. It was a wonderful conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I just like to say in the end that maybe a non-lawyer can teach polity well, but I don't think anybody can teach polity like you. At least I haven't found anybody who can teach polity like you. Let's end there. Thank you for your time.